If you talked back in a black household in 1955, you didn't get a warning. You got a look. And that look alone was enough to stop your heart. It didn't matter where you were. Kitchen, living room, front porch. That look could find you. No words, no explanation, just silence. And somehow, you already knew. You crossed the line. Because in that house, the line was always clear. Not written down, not explained every time, but understood. Parents weren't your friends. They weren't trying to negotiate with you. They were raising you. And raising you meant something very specific. It meant structure. It meant order. It meant knowing your place before the world tried to put you in one. The father's word was final. The mother's word was law. And the children listened. Not because they were afraid all the time, but because they understood something early. There were consequences. Real ones. Immediate ones. Memorable ones. If that look didn't work, and most of the time it did, what came next was swift. No debates, no long explanations about feelings, just correction. And then it was over. No grudges, no holding on. You learned and you moved forward. Because discipline in that house wasn't about control. It was about protection. Parents understood something that every child would eventually learn the hard way. The world outside that door was not forgiving. Not for a black child, not for a black boy. A wrong tone, a wrong word, a wrong move could cost you more than embarrassment. It could cost you everything. So inside that house, they trained you how to speak, how to move, how to carry yourself. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. Thank you. Please. Not optional. Required. If you forgot, you were reminded. Immediately. And you didn't forget again. If adults were talking, you didn't interrupt. You didn't hover. You didn't insert yourself. You found somewhere else to be. Because that wasn't your place. Your place was to listen, to observe, to learn. And over time, you started to understand something deeper. This wasn't random. It wasn't just how things were. It was preparation. Every rule, every correction, every look was shaping you for a world that would not give you second chances. And inside that house, you were not just a child. You were a reflection of your family, of your name, of everything they were trying to build. So when you stepped outside, you didn't just represent yourself. You carried all of it with you. And that weight, it showed up in everything. How you spoke, how you stood, how you were seen. Because in that era, respect wasn't given. It was earned and taught long before you ever needed it. That was the house. That was the system. That was the beginning. If you want to understand that house, don't start in the living room. Start at the table. Because in that time, dinner wasn't something you grabbed. It was something you came to. Every day. Same place, same people, same rhythm. You didn't eat in your room. You didn't eat standing up. You didn't eat whenever you felt like it. You sat down, together, and nobody touched a thing until grace was said. Thank you for this food, for this day, for this family. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't optional. It was part of the structure. And then, the food. Cornbread, still warm from the skillet. Greens, cooked low and slow for hours. Fried chicken, crispy, seasoned, earned. Mac and cheese, made from memory. Not a recipe. But the food was never the point. The table was. That's where the house came together, where the day got unpacked, where people were seen. The father asked questions. How was school? What did you learn? Did you finish your work? The mother watched everything. Elbows off the table. Sit up straight. Chew properly. Older siblings set the example, whether they wanted to or not. And the younger ones watched, always watching. You didn't complain about the food. You didn't pick and choose. You ate what was given, because wasting food wasn't just rude, it was disrespect. And when you were done, you didn't just get up. You asked, "May I be excused?" And even then, you weren't finished, because you helped clean up. Not because someone told you, because that's what you did. That was your role. Every night, the same system, the same connection. And inside that routine, something quiet was happening. Parents were reading their children, not just listening, watching. A change in tone, a shift in posture, a silence where there shouldn't be one. They noticed, because this was the checkpoint, the place where nothing slipped through. Problems showed themselves before they got too big. And outside that house, the world was loud, unpredictable, sometimes dangerous. But inside, there was order, consistency. You knew what to expect. You knew where you stood. You knew you belonged. And then, somewhere along the way, that table disappeared. Not all at once, not in one moment, but slowly. One person eating in front of the TV, another eating in their room. Different schedules, different rhythms, until the table was still there, but nobody was sitting at it. And when that happened, something else disappeared with it. The connection. The daily moment where a family became a family. And most people didn't even notice it was gone. Discipline didn't live in one room. It didn't stay inside your house. It followed you. Everywhere. Because it wasn't just your parents. It was the whole neighborhood. If you stepped out that door, you were still being watched. Not in a bad way. In a responsible way. Mrs. Thompson down the street knew your name. Knew your mother. Knew exactly how you were supposed to act. The man at the corner store had seen you grow up, from running around barefoot to walking to school. And if you forgot yourself, even for a second, they reminded you. Right there, on the spot. No waiting, No warning, just correction. And then they called your mother. And when you got home, you got corrected again. Because that was the system. There was no escape. No version of the story where you got away with it. If you disrespected someone, you answered for it. Immediately. If you lied, you were found out. Quickly. If you crossed the line, the consequences were real, and they stayed with you. People talk about the tools, the switch, the belt, the wooden spoon, but the tools weren't the point. The message was. Actions have consequences. Not later, not after a long discussion. Now. And over time, something settled in. You started thinking before you acted, before you spoke, because you knew what came next, and you respected it. But here's the part people don't always understand. That discipline wasn't about breaking you. It was about building you. Parents weren't reacting to behavior. They were preparing you for the world outside. A world that would not give you grace, that would not explain itself. A world where one mistake could follow you for years. So inside that neighborhood, they created something stronger. A system of accountability, where every adult shared responsibility for every child. You see him? That's one of ours. That's our responsibility. That's why kids could play outside until the streetlights came on. Because every porch had eyes. Every block had protection and correction. There was trust, real trust, between parents, between neighbors. If someone else stepped in, it wasn't an insult. It was support. Thank you for watching him. I'll handle it from here. That's how it worked. That's why it worked. Because everyone was aligned. The same expectations. The same standards. The same line. And slowly, that changed. Not all at once, not in one generation, but piece by piece. A neighbor corrects a child, and it turns into an argument, a confrontation. Parents pull back, doors close, fences go up, and the system starts to break. Because once the village disappears, the weight shifts. Back to one house, one set of parents, trying to do what used to take a community. And without that network, something else fades. Consistency. The feeling that no matter where you went, the rules stayed the same. And when that disappears, so does the structure that held everything together. If the table was the center of the house, Sunday was the center of the week. It wasn't optional. It wasn't flexible. It was understood. Saturday night, the preparation began. Shoes polished, clothes pressed, outfits laid out for the next morning. Hair done, carefully, patiently, with time. You didn't rush Sunday. You got ready for it. And Sunday morning, the house moved differently. Earlier than usual. Quieter than usual. Breakfast together. Then dressed. Properly. Those clothes weren't everyday clothes. They meant something. That suit, that dress, those polished shoes. Reserved. Not for school, not for play, for church. Because church wasn't just a place you went. It was where you belonged. Inside, you sat still. You listened. You didn't fidget. You didn't whisper. You didn't forget where you were. Because this was bigger than you. Bigger than the house. It was the one place where everyone came together, dressed their best, carried themselves differently, with pride, with dignity. And if you forgot that, even for a second, you felt it. A tap on the shoulder, a look from across the room, a reminder without words. Because embarrassing your family in that space was something you did not do. After service, it didn't end. It shifted from church to family. Aunties, uncles, cousins, everybody came. Not scheduled, expected. The house filled up, voices layered over each other, laughter, stories, children outside, running, playing, free. Adults in the kitchen, talking about everything. Work, family, life. Nobody was in a rush. Nobody was checking a clock. Time slowed down. And for a few hours, everything felt stable, connected. Because Sunday wasn't just routine, it was a reset. A reminder that you were part of something bigger than yourself, bigger than the week. It gave the family rhythm, consistency, a point to return to, no matter what happened. And then, like everything else, it started to fade. One missed Sunday, then another, then it becomes optional. Schedules change, priorities shift, time gets faster, until one day you realize that rhythm is gone. The anchor that held the week together is no longer there. And without it, something else drifts. The connection, the identity, the feeling of belonging to something that lasts. Nothing we've talked about disappeared overnight. It didn't break in one moment. It didn't collapse all at once. It faded, piece by piece, meal by meal, Sunday by Sunday. A little less structure, a little more flexibility, a few rules that started to bend, and then kept bending. Until one day, they weren't rules anymore. They were suggestions. The dinner table became optional. Discipline became a conversation. Authority became negotiable. The village became distance. Locked doors, private lives, and respect, something that used to be expected, became something people hoped for. Now listen, this is not about saying everything before was perfect. It wasn't. There were things that needed to change, things that deserved to change, and they did. But in fixing what was broken, something else got left behind, something that was working. Structure, consistency, standards. The quiet understanding that a child doesn't need endless choices. They need direction. The belief that love isn't just comfort. It's preparation. Preparation for a world that will not adjust itself to make things easier. And that's the part that hits different. Because those parents weren't raising children for the moment. They were raising them for reality, for pressure, for difficulty, for a life where excuses wouldn't protect them. Only discipline would. Only character would. And look at what came out of that. People who endured, who adapted, who built with very little. People who carried themselves with a kind of quiet strength you didn't have to explain. And now, we're in a different moment. Different tools, different challenges, different distractions. But the question is still the same. What do you keep? And what do you let go? Because the knowledge, it's not gone. It's still here. In stories, in memories, in the way people say, "My mama didn't play." That's not just a joke. That's a blueprint, compressed into a sentence. And some people are starting to bring it back. Quietly. Without announcements. Without making it a trend. One meal at a time. One boundary at a time. One conversation without a phone in the room. Teaching respect again. Rebuilding routine. Reconnecting with family. It doesn't have to look like 1955. The world has changed. It shouldn't. But the bones, the structure, the foundation, that still works. It still holds. If you choose to use it. Because the truth is, the Black family was never weak. It survived things most systems don't survive. Pressure, loss, generations of challenge. And it held together because it had something strong at the center. Something intentional. So now, the question isn't, what happened? The question is, what are you going to do with it? Because every person listening carries a piece of it, whether you realize it or not. And rebuilding doesn't start with everything. It starts small. One rule you don't bend. One meal you sit down for. One moment where you choose structure over convenience. That's how it begins. That's how it always began. The foundation is still there. You just have to build on it again.